About a month ago, I bought my very first house that was in the bush because I was living in a noisy town with non-stop sounds and only 2 neighbors who were really nice to me and to each other. Skip about 2 weeks ahead, when I had all my things with me and I started to hear weird sounds from the basement around 2, 0 to 5. 0 in the morning, like white banging and weird. When I woke up in the morning to check, I noticed the basement door had a heavy-duty lock on it. I was looking for the key, eventually finding it behind the kitchen door in a cabinet. I grabbed a flashlight and my small army pocket knife, just in case it was an animal trying to get out. Unlocked it, slowly opened the door with my flashlight on and turned on the lights. Everything looked like a normal basement with your water pump and all that stuff. But I noticed a corner of the room had 2 concrete walls with an old-style white door, like from the 1990s, with no windows on the door or walls. I opened it, and it was a 5 by 6 meter room with nothing in it, just an empty room with no lights in it. Just a lifeless room. But boy, I was completely wrong about that. I looked in the corner of the small room, and what I think I saw was a tall black figure with a V-shaped head and the body of a mangled human. It turned around, and that's when I could describe it even more. The eyes were solid white, and they had what looked like scribbles on them, making them look, I don't really like using this word, cursed, like from a horror movie. Then it screamed at me and started to chase me out of the basement. I dropped my knife at that point, because I was afraid of this thing. I ran to the door, quickly closing it and locking it so it wouldn't get out. I could hear it quietly clawing and making the same sounds like the ones I hear almost every night. The next morning, I decided to board up the door with 5 boards, grab chains, and lock it tight together so nothing would move or break out. Due to this, I still hear sounds here and there, but they're mostly active at night. I have so many questions, so I talked to my neighbor, who won't say his name, and their dad told them a story of a man who did dark magic and cursed that land and the house with a demon that would torment them forever as long as they lived here until they moved away and off the land. Basically, protecting the land from new people that moved in. Here are some of the questions I had for myself. Why is that thing in my basement making these noises and trying to hurt me? What was its purpose? Why is it in there in the first place? Who or what is this thing? I don't want to hear or see it anymore. I don't know how to get rid of this thing, or just make it leave me alone. This has been going on non-stop every night for weeks now, and I can't make it stop. I'm sharing a very real and tragic story that happened to an old friend of mine about a month ago. Since the investigation and court proceedings are still ongoing, I will be using alternate names to protect the privacy of the victims involved. The reason I know so many intimate details about the event is because my coworker's fiance was one of the detectives who was assigned to the case. Small world, huh? For a brief backstory, I met the victim through a mutual friend, whom I will call Mia. Mia and I became friends in college because we took several classes together. We don't share many common interests, but we have years worth of history, jokes, and common experiences, which have kept us connected over the past several years since we graduated. Mia was heavily into fetish art, which was one interest we did not bond over. No pun intended. If you're unfamiliar with fetish art, it's where somebody dresses up in BDS, loathing for photo shoots, performances, and conventions. From what I know, Mia was not into the BDS. Play but rather the artistic expression and aesthetic. I don't understand the appeal. But I don't judge her for it, to each their own. Back in college, Mia invited me to a university party where I first met the victim, whom I will call Bianca. When I met Bianca, she was a stunning girl in her early 20s with an effervescent personality that only added to her glow. Bianca had this energy about her that immediately put everyone at ease, no matter the situation. I don't want to lean into stereotypes, but the prettiest girl in the room isn't typically the kindest or most welcoming. Yet Bianca was all three. I learned that evening that Bianca was also a member of the fetish art community, which is how she and Maya became friends. I ran into Bianca at a few more parties before we graduated, but we lost touch after graduation. Mia and Bianca had remained good friends after college due to their involvement in the fetish art community, but Bianca had become very distant and reclusive over the past 7 months since she started dating her new boyfriend, whom I will call Griffin. Griffin was terribly possessive, controlling, and emotionally and physically abusive. He would use BDSM as an excuse to abuse Bianca, but because Bianca wasn't allowed to communicate openly with her friends and family, no one knew how dangerous her situation had become. Flash forward to the present. I received a text from Mia on a Sunday asking if I remembered Bianca from college, which I confirmed. Mia then let me know that Bianca had been reported missing. Bianca and Griffin were supposed to attend an event together on Friday, but never showed up. Some of the event attendants tried to contact Bianca, but no one could reach her. Shortly thereafter, Bianca's phone's location was mysteriously turned off. People called and got a hold of Griffin afterward, and he said he had no idea where Bianca was, and that he had been waiting for her to come home, so the couple could head to the event together. Griffin's response was a major red flag, since he always knew Bianca's location due to how controlling he was. Griffin would spy on her and abuse her if she lied or tried to see her family without permission. He never allowed Bianca to go anywhere without him. So how would he suddenly not know where she was? Bianca's family was contacted very early Saturday morning and informed that Bianca had been missing since the night prior and suspected something terrible had happened. Since her family had to wait 48 hours from the time of her disappearance before filing a missing persons report, the police did not start investigating until Sunday, which is when Mia texted me the news. The detectives immediately went to Griffin's apartment, but he refused to grant the police entry without a search warrant. For whatever reason, Griffin was under the impression that the detectives wouldn't be granted a warrant, which is pretty ridiculous considering he was the only suspect. Because Griffin assumed his interaction with the police was over, he didn't attempt to flee. Contrary to his assumption, the detectives easily got a warrant, returned to the apartment, and found Griffin naked in the kitchen, wearing yellow rubber gloves and laying down a black tarp on the floor. Surrounding him were several tools, such as a bone saw, Lysol wipes, goggles, industrial tape, and vacuum-sealed plastic bags. Also in the kitchen, the detectives found a blood-soaked duffel bag that smelled like, and I quote, the most vile and pungent mix of feces, decaying fish, sulfur, and sweat. The detectives immediately arrested Griffin for attempting to conceal the murder of another person, which later became a charge of first-degree murder. As I'm sure you have guessed, Bianca's body was inside the bag alongside a bloody ballistic knife, which Griffin purchased illegally. Bianca's head was decapitated and her body was covered in various cuts, with shattered ribs and a broken trachea. If you're wondering why Griffin kept a dead body in his apartment for 3 days, I'll let you connect those disgusting dots on your own. Apparently, Bianca and Griffin had been engaging in BDE, SM, play, and Griffin indulged in his deepest and darkest fantasies. Sadly, Bianca was on the receiving end of his evil. After Griffin's arrest, all of Bianca's friends and family discovered that Griffin was a registered sex offender and had already been incarcerated 8 times for sexual assault, drug and weapon charges, and aggravated assault in the span of 9 years. I look forward to knowing Griffin will spend the rest of his life behind bars when he is convicted of his senseless and lustful acts. Bianca was a beautiful and pure-hearted person whose murder could have been prevented if her friends and family had noticed all of the red flags and acted to rescue her from her situation. I will close my story with a simple call to action. First, please pay attention to the behavior of your loved ones. Sometimes people can't vocalize their desperate need for help, but there may be behavioral clues instead. Secondly, please always remember to do a simple Google search or background check on your future partners before going too deep and backing out. If Bianca had simply looked up Griffin's name in history, she might have avoided such a gruesome and untimely death. I'm thankful that Bianca's beautiful light shined in my life, even though the duration was brief. I hope her family finds the peace and justice that they deserve. Rest in peace, Bianca. For clarification, if I use G, I'm using the first letter of my name in the context of a quotation that will be used later on in the story. When I was a teenager, my mom loved buying antiques for cheap at thrift stores. She was admittedly a little obsessed, and sometimes I didn't like the things she considered buying or the things she brought home. I'm a Christian, and I also believe I may be just slightly in tune with the spirit realm, even though I desperately try to snuff it out, because I don't like the things I've seen or heard in my childhood apartment. Sometimes the antiques gave off a really negative energy. I'd feel physically creeped out, icky, nauseous, or tired, especially if we went to multiple thrift stores in a day. My mom bought these absolutely beautiful decorative crystal balls, which she put in a bowl as our table centerpiece instead of wax fruits. She finds wax fruits tacky, but I never liked the way they made me feel. One night, after the purchase of these crystal decorations, I had the weirdest, most vivid dream that I was in New Orleans, about to go on a haunted house tour. I was at a cafe talking to this black woman in a yellow dress and sun hat. She told me she was a psychic, and so was I. She told me it was a gift, but I had to be careful. She also warned me that once I went on the haunted house tour, no one in my family should touch anything inside the house, or else we'd be haunted. So in the dream, I go to the haunted house with my mother, father, and brother, and it is a lovely house. But before I could really explore, I heard a crash, and my brother said, "Oops." I turned around, and my brother had broken a vase near the house's entrance. The door was open, and I saw the black woman walk by, and she gave me this knowing, haunted glare, like I had just made the worst mistake of my life. Then I woke up, but something was off. Somehow, even though last I checked, it was bunched up and left hanging on some furniture before bed. My bathrobe had mysteriously been draped over the front of my body, completely flat and smooth, like a tarp over a dead body. I was scared to death and so confused. I complained to my parents, but they tried to talk me out of it, being some sort of haunting. There were also some stereotypical events that happened soon after, like unexplained breathing and footsteps in the house instead of the ceiling. We live on the bottom floor. The next thing I remember is my mother and I talking. She was sitting in her lounging chair when suddenly she complained about a nasty smell. I told her I didn't smell anything, and I kid you not, the minute I said that, I felt a movement and energy leave my mother and walk up to me and sit on me, and I immediately smelled rotten eggs. My mom says she felt it walk away from her. She also complained that sometimes she thought Dad had come home and would be talking to her out of the corner of her eye. But he wouldn't be home. Things came to a head a few nights later. For context, we were getting up at around 6:00 a.m. that morning because my mom and brother needed blood work done because they have autoimmune diseases. And they weren't leaving me home alone. But basically, me and my mom had this little ritual where she'd try to wake me up. I'd mumble and complain and roll around in bed. She'd pull the sheet off, turn all the lights on, etc. It was kind of funny, and normally I was able to sneak in 5 more minutes of sleep. But this night, things were wrong. I was awoken from a dead sleep by a voice that sounded like my mother whispering, "Gee, it's time to get up." My mother never whispered, and I never noticed that detail until afterwards, so I kind of mumbled and rolled over in my bed, never opening my eyes. And what happened next? Nothing. No lights turning on. No louder. Come on. Gee, it's time to wake up. And no pulling my blanket forcefully away. But even after the exorcism, my mother complained about strange happenings. Talking to my father when he wasn't home, smells, etc. So she decided it must be the crystal balls, and she picked them up to try to throw them away. And one quite literally flew out of her hand and landed on the floor. She claims it felt like someone snatched it out of her hand, but she still threw them out despite the paranormal protest. The activity stopped pretty much immediately after. I still live with her now because I'm in college and this economy has made it impossible to find a job or move. But let's just say whenever my mom wants to bring home used furniture, I talk her ear off in protest and remind her how she traumatized me with her crystal balls. Just breathing, like angry, huffy-puffy breathing, like my mother was truly ready to be mad at me, ready to strangle me. Then footsteps stomped out of the room. I was very confused by this reaction. I thought about it for a while and wondered if she was going to leave me alone at home. So I checked the time. It was 3:00 a.m. I spent the rest of the night sleeping in my parents' room, and my dad performed an exorcism the next night. I had to turn a light on while writing this. I still feel so chilled and sick recounting the events even now. So one fine day, I got a text from my friends. It's a good rainy day. Let's go to a waterfall nearby. Where do they get the energy to climb a hill when it's raining so heavily? Why can't they enjoy a nice cup of tea or coffee and a playlist? Well, either way, there was no point in denying it, because they would drag me out of my house anyway. So we decided to set out in the evening. I had a great place in mind. We reached there around 5:00 p.m., even though I had planned to laze around in my room. Witnessing such a scene of a mountain covered with a blanket of fog and a distant view of a waterfall was worth the trip. It had little to no crowd, as it was a weekday. When we started climbing, it took 4 of us around 20 minutes to reach the waterfall. The view of the city from up there was mesmerizing. There was a very small area surrounded by big rocks at the summit of the waterfall. The flow had created hot spring-style potholes, one below another. There were few people up there, around 4 except us. As the waterfall was loud, it was hard to communicate without yelling. We are the kind of group that just enjoys each other's company even when there is no conversation going on. We all sat in one of those potholes in silence, vibing with the feeling of flowing water, the enchanting view, and the sound of falling. It was bliss, and we all drifted off. After some time passed by as I was lost in thoughts, admiring the view, I noticed a small broken branch of white flower flowing beside me. I watched it flow down one pothole to another. It was peaceful watching it flow off until it went out of view in thick forest. That's when I jolted out of my daydream. I looked back wondering what my friends were up to, and they were all still drifting off on their own, ones laying down enjoying the flow, and other is sky gazing. I started noticing something strange. It was quite quiet. I couldn't hear people talking or laughing as before. I looked back and I realized the place was deserted. We were the only ones left behind. When I checked my watch, it made me feel uneasy, because when we came here and sat down, it was around 6:15 p.m. for what I and everyone with me thought had been 15 minutes of idling. There was a 45-minute time gap we could not explain. When I told them it was almost 7:00 p.m., they all thought I was joking, but after confirming, they had a confused yet blank look on their faces and didn't know what to make of the situation. At the moment, we decided not to overthink it and decided to descend as it was getting dark. But whatever luck we had, the sunset was late that day. As we started our way down with the chit-chat, I was still bugged about the fact that all 4 of us were sitting there ideally for almost an hour, and none of us noticed, and how I didn't notice people leaving. As I was overflowing in these thoughts, I heard a whistling sound come from the forest, edge of the trail we were walking. Just to give you readers a clear idea of the trail, it was a narrow path on the edge of the hill, and down below was slide of deep forestation. I looked at my friends to see if anyone heard it too, but they all seemed to be busy with their conversation. I shrugged it off as it may be a bird. As I continued few steps down, I heard it again, a whistle, kind of which sounded very human. I watched my friends walking in front of me as they all looked in same direction as the sound came from down the edge. first, when we heard the whistle, it sounded casual. But as we paced further, the tone changed and sounded way more like it wanted our attention. The conversation between them was slowly dying down as they started to realize what the situation was. I also noticed the whistling was coming from the same distance even though we were moving, as if whatever was making that sound was maintaining the same 5 to 10 meter distance between us. Well, to say it clearly, following us. And I guess everyone with me had started to realize this without my saying it. The thing about a late time sunset is that it lights the sky as long as it does, and in a matter of minutes, it is dark as the middle of the night. It seemed like our luck had run out. We were all most out of the forest area, but it was pitch dark and we were at the mercy of our phone's flashlights, and slippery, muddy trails were not any help for our pace. I was walking up front because some turns needed a support hand to pass by. As we were almost out of this forest, I was starting to feel a little hopeful. But if I had known it was a false feeling, something happened that none of us had expected. A sound of a branch breaking followed by a whistle sent a chill down everyone's spine. My heart was racing faster than ever. I looked back, and everyone was frozen in their tracks like a deer in headlights. I wanted to flash the light in the direction of the sound, but something screamed inside of me to leave it alone, somehow calming myself. I instead decided to check on my friends. 2 of them were holding on somehow, but the one who was walking in last was the one who was walking in last. She had tears in her eyes, almost ready to give up and scream her lungs out for help. Sincerely, she would have done that if she wasn't paralyzed by fear. I could sense she, or none of them, wanted to be the last person standing. I knew everyone, including me, just wanted to run like hell broke loose. But that would have only led to some serious casualties as the path was filled with sharp stones. I mustered up whatever hope I had left not to panic, walked all the way back, and tapped on her shoulders, signaling her to move forward while joking about how she was slowing us down. In my mind, I begged that they would go along and not cause the scene, and for the sake of it, they did, laughing awkwardly at the joke and pacing forward. All life on Earth, including humans, animals, birds, and even insects, shares one thing in their DNA: instinct, a necessity for survival at that moment. Not out of fear, but something inside us was telling us that something was lurking in that slope of thick forest. The slope that was nearly impossible to stand on or walk through for any normal human. Somehow, we all knew, and we absolutely cannot acknowledge the whistle, or that there is something in those bushes. After what felt like forever, we managed to get out of the forest. We rushed towards our bikes and took off as fast as we could. Coming into the city, the sound of traffic and lights calmed us down. I noticed we were all shivering from cold and maybe fear. I made a stop at a tea stall, and the warmth of the tea was soothing. As time passed, the fear started to fade away, and curiosity took its place. We started brainstorming about what actually happened to us. Were we scared of random noises? Was our brain messing with us out of fear? Many theories and logical reasonings can be created out of it, and we came up with the best theory, that it could have been a bird that mimics humans. Sound reasonable, right? After all, some crows and parrots can basically have conversations. How hard can it be for it to whistle? And we all shrugged it off. As the days passed by, it still didn't fit right with me. So I decided to do some research about this place, like what kinds of birds and animals are found in the area. Well, to my surprise, none of the native birds could mimic sounds. Also, it is supposed to be a hunting ground for kites, so birds smaller in size tend to avoid the area, which threw parrot theory out of the equation. As I went down the rabbit hole, I found something that made my blood cold and made matters much worse. Apparently, there were several cases of suicides and accidental deaths of many men, women, and children, some of whose bodies were never found. Police officers always seal the entrance with barricades during heavy rainy days, but some locals always manage to slip by and have met with such unfortunate accidents. I could not find any story similar to ours. But then again, this spot was not known to many and was only known to locals. I am documenting this. To this day, I have no explanation for what could have happened to us that day. Ghost. Or something out of folklore like skinwalkers. Or a mind game of fear. I would leave this to your imagination.